Of course, it's not showing on there because I'm not doing it on that computer, but
It's being sent to a third
Yeah,
party.
I've got a message.
So
Show me on YouTube.
there it is. And we are live on YouTube.
Well done.
Why, thank you. Thanks to my assistant Dee and Brittany, who figured this out and just told me how to do it. It's not my idea.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so the first order, we get to the calendar.
Yes. So I had reviewed, you want to start with the larger calendar, I think we had that one pretty well nailed down, except wanted to possibly add one more meeting next week if we could. In light of everything that has been going on these past 2 weeks. It would be helpful to have a little bit of extra time with the budget memo component of the packet. We do have the draft forms that we showed you the last time. There's really only that change we made to the supplemental form. But it would be, June and I talked about it too. It would be helpful to have just that one extra week in light of all of the DESI matters that we've been discussing.
Okay, which is basically, I mean, this is where I was even behind of my own going through.
It's been a lot of stuff, yeah.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I have no objection to that, but it's a matter of everybody's availability for next Wednesday.
I'm available.
I am,
That's the 23rd.
yeah.
I think it's all right, yeah.
Okay. So I can reach out, unless you want to, Scar, I'm happy to reach out to Julie and just
Yeah.
ask her to post that meeting for next Wednesday at 7:30. That would be 10:23. And then nothing else has changed with regard to the calendar as proposed. Also in terms of the calendar for visits, I did correct the dates. And we did have a department head meeting yesterday. I did hand out the calendar and I asked if anyone had conflicts. So far, everyone is good on the department side. So I sent it out today to the boards and committees, CC'd the FinCom and asked if anyone does have a conflict, either way, actually, to please confirm. And if anyone who is not presenting before the FinCom would like to come before the FinCom to say hello, that they're welcome to do so as well. I did hear back from the Cultural Council. They said they were thankful for the invite. They have no changes, so they would not be requesting a meeting with the FinCom. So
Okay.
no changes there at this time. Oh, except that we did receive confirmation from Assabet that they can come on the 11th. So I do have that confirmation. And the I will double check with Berlin Boylston. I believe I received a preliminary confirmation from them on the 11th, but let me double check on that. All right. What do we want to do in terms of forms then?
I don't think there was gonna be any changes to the actual budget forms.
No, unless anyone wanted
Unless
changes.
somebody
we
wants
had-
additional.
Yeah, we had put them in the drive.
Ahead of the last meeting, right?
Yep.
So I have it in my emails.
Yeah, and they're in the drive, in the Google Drive. all the forms. So,
Making sure.
yep, and emailed out too, I believe. I think I put them in both places.
I think so.
So I can double check too.
Definitely in the drive.
Good, okay. So the only other document was updating that supplemental funding request, which we were working on today. And we can talk about that now that we have another meeting next week. But it's similar to what we discussed last week in adding the long-term ongoing costs of any funding requests. So let me actually I will pull it up and actually share my screen. Let's see. And then you can see it up there as well. Just give me a second. Nope, doesn't want me to do that. Oh, technology.
Remember which one you're on.
I know. There we go. Okay. Make it bigger. So this is the supplemental funding request form that we implemented back in FY 24, I
Yeah,
believe
I
it
think so.
was, which was my first budget year. So what we did was add the last set of questions, and I tried to put in everything we could possibly think of for examples. But the question as it now stands is, are there any maintenance, personnel, electricity, water, trash removal, future anticipated repairs or replacement of parts/equipment, and or any other additional costs associated with this request? Please describe in detail and attach capital request form if applicable. So that way we're not doing things in a vacuum. Like we talked about when we did rec last year, there were many, many components to what they were proposing. There were extra personnel expenses on the mowing side for seasonal workers for highway. There were additional costs associated with electricity, irrigation, when we were looking in the context of that project. So wanting to make sure that when folks are putting in these forms, they're capturing and thinking about those additional costs as well. So that is really the only change that we made. And if you'd like me to add any other specific costs in there, we tried to kind of capture what we think of. I might have.
I'm sure there's some scenarios.
I'm sure there's some, but June and I were racking our brains going, oh, trash removal, we're adding everything as we think of it, so.
So Kristen, I don't think the forms are in my email and Google Drive won't let me in.
Oh, okay,
So,
hold on.
and I'm using a charter email, so I don't know whether it doesn't know me or
Um,
if you can send me a link,
I'm gonna send you a link
then
right
everything will
now.
be fixed and the forms are there, so I won't be looking for them.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
And you're using your charter?
Using that charter, Porter NB charter, yeah.
Okay. I think, let me just see. Share. Just make sure I have you in here under the correct email. Yeah, I have you in here as a viewer. That is weird.
Well,
But hold on, let me go into the specific one.
sorry, but it would be good to
Oh, yeah, I understand you want,
identify what we're looking at,
uh,
whether I've
So
certainly
which other
seen this
file?
form before.
copy link. Let me see if I do it with the link, if that'll work for you. All right, let me just stop sharing my screen for a minute here.
You sharing?
Whoa,
Oh, that's a little weird.
what was that?
I don't know. That was me stopping sharing my screen and it did something really
It does
funky.
it on occasion. It's just really bizarre.
That was exciting.
Yeah, we try to add a little, funky
Is
activity.
that like a black funnel that
It
sort of
was,
came and went?
yeah.
It's tornado.
Halloween is coming.
It sure is. All right, see, Mary, if this works for you that I just sent you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You are very welcome. And in the meantime, I'm gonna go in and just make sure everything under FY 26 has you in there properly as well. Yep, you should be all set in there too, so.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so that's it for changes to the budget forms, unless anyone has any other requested changes. It's kind of a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They've worked for quite some time now, and they've worked at least for the past few years, that I can say for sure, but well beyond that. Jim
Yeah.
put together a great packet. So I think, works well.
If we come across anything, we can always add it for next year, so
Yep, if any,
Or
questions come
currently.
out through the process, we can always make those updates at the time. So,
Okay,
all
I've got nothing else.
right. That's it on the forms. I don't know if you would like me to give a couple of brief updates to start on our other conversations, or do you want to start?
No, I'll let you give your updates and
Okay. So as you may remember, the FinCom and the Select Board did actually jointly discuss, but it did come from a vote of the Select Board to reach out to DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, at the end of last year's budget cycle, requesting an opinion from the Commissioner of DESE on the assessments for FY25 from the Berlin-Boylston Regional School District. They did ask for information from the town and from the district, which we provided, the district provided. They worked on it over the summer. And last week, they asked me to jump on a call and kind of gave me an overview of what was going to be in the letter that they were sending out. And the letter they had sent to me dated October 11th has been shared with both the FinCom as well as the Select Board. And it, I think, gives us some good steps for moving forward for FY26. And some of the key things that they're really, recommending is they're stressing transparency on behalf of the district, which I think is really key. And they stress that over and over again in the call, and that information should be forthcoming when requested from the district, especially with the FinCom and the parties that are specifically involved. They also spoke about the regional agreement and that they found it overly complex, particularly when it came to the formula in the agreement, and that they felt that they, even as the state, had trouble understanding the intent, the original intent of that agreement. So their recommendation is to redo the regional agreement. And they've shared this information with the school administration as well. And just for those who might be watching, right now there are two interim heads, if you will, over at the school. There's an interim superintendent and an interim finance director. There will be a permanent finance director starting, from what I understand, on November 18th or there around. And I'm not certain exactly what's going on with a permanent superintendent position. I haven't been privy to such information. But I can tell you that the interim superintendent and finance director asked to meet with me last week. And I was very forthcoming with them about the concerns that we had as part of the budget process for FY25. And they said that they noticed some concerns as well as they were going through. As of a week ago Tuesday, when the school committee had a meeting, the interim finance director had been on the job for 23 days. So they have literally spent, and the superintendent 30 days, they've spent the last month really diving into the FY25 budget and trying to make sure everything is set up for that. Our conversation was not only about the FY25 budget, but also how to move forward with FY26. However, it quickly turned to FY25 when it was noted that there is a $1.4 million deficit in FY25. And this was presented to the school committee at last Tuesday's school committee meeting, which I think was shared with both the FinCom and the Select Board. And you've hopefully had an opportunity to see it, or you can see it if not yet. And from what I've heard since then, there's been a little bit of back and forth on, is that really a deficit? Is it a lack of understanding about the software system with the new staff? My understanding is that there are ways and options that the school has to address that deficit. One is using their reserves, which we know, special education, circuit breaker. There's also potentially cuts that they could make on their side. In the discussion that I had, nothing was brought up about going back to the towns to look for that funding. And obviously that's something that I would strongly push back on, especially since we're a quarter of the way into FY25. And we all know the assessment process was challenging enough as it is. And we made, I think, a lot of sacrifices and compromises on our end. But this, I really feel, is a district issue. They are working directly with DESI. The interims, if you will, both self-reported their concerns to DESI and are working closely with them. And they want to work closely with the administration, with the towns going forward. So, you know, one thing I think that's going to be really critical is making sure that, you know, the interims are very seasoned professionals. I can tell you they all have decades of experience in their fields, but they are the interims. And I don't know much about the new finance director who's coming in or the new superintendent who will eventually be there. But their goal is to get FY25 on course and set us on a good path for FY26. Really, the understanding of the school budget should be coming from the school administration. But obviously, we had to take a deeper dive into it as the FinCom and the town these past couple of years. And I really want to make sure that the process is as smooth as possible going forward. And so one of the things that I had spoken about, you know, with DESI and making sure that we comply with all policies is I, you know, am going to make sure that I'm a bit more buffed up on the rules because obviously it's a trust but verify kind of situation. And I think it's been a good learning experience and a process for all of us, but we need a better path going forward for communicating information. And I think the best way to do that is to, when, you know, bring recommendations forward. The FinCom makes decisions, obviously the select board makes decisions. You guys funnel that information and questions back to me, and I'll take it back to the school administration. And the administration's work to answer those questions and concerns at an administration level, and then disseminate the information back out. As someone might have referred to earlier, I'm sort of like the cruise director. I make recommendations, you guys make decisions, and I funnel the information along. So that way everybody's on the same page, getting the same information at the same time. So my role is certainly not to make any decisions, but just to help make sure we're all hearing the same thing and we're all on the same page. And the school administration actually expressed that desire as well. The new interim superintendent and interim finance director, that is the process they are more familiar with using throughout their longstanding careers in this business as well. So I think brighter days are ahead, if you will, even though we're dealing with how to figure out FY25 right now, but that is really a district issue. That is not a town issue as I see it at this point, because they are going to have to figure out what they do for their reserves. But obviously that's going to impact FY26, because if they have to use a significant amount of their reserves to address any type of deficit, then they don't have those reserves for FY26. So the other couple of key points in the DESI letter that I think are important is they really stressed the one bottom line number vote. And I said to, you know, the Associate Commissioner, Jay Sullivan, I said, you know, we have a hard time with that on our side because that's not the way that we've done it. And he said, when you go regional, there is no breakdown between the schools. He said, there's no breaking down bills, 50%, 25, 25. It's literally one bottom line number. The district gets a budget of X million dollars and it goes to whatever. And that is really how it works. And so I think where we regionalized on paper, we never fully regionalized philosophically or financially. And that is something that DESI is telling us that we have to do. And the commissioner is willing to come to a meeting and speak to the FinCom about that as well.
Yeah, so Kristen, let me just interrupt with a.
No, it's fine. I was wrapping up.
Quick question on that one. So, if it's one number, how are the assessments handled? There's got to be.
So there's a formula in the regional agreement in terms of how to assess the towns, but the FinCom, the school basically is going to tell the town what they're going to assess the town. The FinCom can push back and say, we can't afford this. This is what we can afford. And the school and the town should have a conversation. Information should be presented, documentation, justification for why they're requesting that assessment. But at the end of the day, there's not two budgets on the warrant. It is the school committee's budget and we vote yay or nay on the bottom line number. And that's unfortunately the way that it has to be because we are a district.
With
Am
capital
I
loss.
confused? I thought there was one number on the budget.
So it was
On
broken
the
down by
warrant, excuse
school.
me.
It was broken down by school. So there was a Berlin Memorial number, a Tohoto number.
Right, okay.
So, and then we also broke it out by capital,
Mhm.
and operating and debt. So debt we have to figure out because that may actually have to be voted as a separate number. That one I have to ask about.
Or just noted.
Or, yeah,
Yeah.
marked out, but, we can't even break out capital from operating.
So how do they
Sorry,
plan
but- sorry,
moving?
But all
Yeah.
that could be noted with one number actually voted.
It sure can be noted in the
Mhm.
description, absolutely. We just have to make
So-
sure we vote on the one bottom line number.
That's just pretty administrative. That's not a big change.
It
As
is,
long as the information is
but
there.
the reality is they can move money between those schools and those line items without a vote or consent of the town. It is one number for the district as a whole.
I think it's kind of that way now, because once you throw the money over the fence, you don't have a receipt. You don't know what happens to it.
I think it
that
is,
way.
but I think philosophically in some people's minds, because of the way we break it out now on the warrant, people think X amount goes to Berlin Memorial, X amount
No,
goes to
not-
Tohoto.
Not in my mind, no.
Okay, well, I was getting the impression for some people, they did view it that way
I
because of
would
how
echo
it was.
that. There is that
presented.
perception. I would
You
agree.
think so?
Yeah,
Mhm.
there is.
Because
Sure.
this was the first year that we actually voted it as one.
In
In
June.
prior years,
Yep.
right, it's always been separated, so.
How do they plan to work with our capital committees on doing the capital plan?
It's a great question. I did tell them about our capital deadlines and our capital bylaw and asked that they follow and adhere to those deadlines. They have stated they will. And I believe they should still come before capital, make those recommendations. Capital should forward a decision on what they would recommend. And ultimately, yes, it does get folded into the bottom line budget, but it helps to guide them in terms of what can be afforded, because obviously that's coming from the town's perspective, a different funding source. So that's a bit challenging. And that's a good question to ask the commissioner as well, how that is sorted out in other communities. We didn't quite get that far on the call. He just kept saying one number, one number.
We understand, I understand the one number, but I guess a big part is you still need some level of transparency of something to
Yep.
break down those numbers. You can't say it's just one number, because that's kind of what the school committee went with last year,
Right.
tried to push just the one number, and we saw the results of that.
Mhm.
And we need something that still has to be broken out in some way. I mean, we don't get just one number from Assabet, right? I mean, we do see their overall budget and how the breakdown of percentages and all that type of stuff.
Right, but we don't vote on any of the individual parts. And so that was their point, was that we don't have the right to vote on any of the individual parts, which if I'm reading into that, would say that legally we don't have the right to split out capital from operating. But the debt question is there too. So I'm gonna make a list of follow-up questions. And he did also say that the associate commissioner, he would be willing to remote in November to a FinCom meeting to have a further discussion with us on it too and answer any questions we had.
Kristen, sorry, go ahead, Cliff.
I'm glad to hear that, in your communication with the, excuse me, the administration, that they're going to, follow our bylaw in terms of capital requests, because that's a great step. They say, yes, we understand your process, and we will participate in that.
Yep.
And I want to echo your point, is that, when they do that, they will get feedback from the capital committee, which will lead them to understand where the town is in relationship to that kind of spending, whatever it is that they're requesting.
Correct.
They can ignore that information, but they'll have it.
Right.
And I think that that's great. I think that that's a big step, because they haven't done the capital request process, have they?
Other than last year, yes.
Okay.
In my
No,
first
it's-
year here, they did go through it, and I believe
Yeah.
before that as well.
Yeah,
I
Well,
think
yeah,
so.
absolutely.
I can assure you that
absolutely.
when I was in the school committee, we did, yes, but I thought you meant for the last couple of years they haven't done.
Oh, no, it was, my first year here, that process was followed pretty much to a T. Where we ran into issues were on the operating side in 24. And then we ran into issues on both sides in
Yeah.
25, if you will, which
Okay.
now we know can't really be split out, but just for,
Well, I think
You know,
in
speaking
the
purposes.
24 budget, we fully funded all the capital requests, so we didn't have issues because we had the money.
we had
It was a
extra
different
free cash.
circumstance.
Correct.
I clearly remember from my days on the committee that we got feedback on capital from the town in the fall.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
I mean, we were aware of that, and I remember there were conversations about, well, maybe this is not something we can do, or maybe we can do less, or maybe we can, those conversations went on pretty early, if I recall correctly.
Oh, yeah, because capital is actually due the end of this month to the capital committee. So it starts first with them.
And I definitely remember the director of finance and operations coming to the committee saying, so, we've met with the town, and you've approved these requests, and this is what I'm hearing. And, maybe we can do something about this,
Right.
I remember those conversations. I don't remember the detail.
But they happened.
Well, because at the time we were dealing with the structure above the gym where the heating system was. It was dangerous. That was one of the capital things we were dealing with. And it had come in really high, and the capital committee said, maybe not. And so I remember we did push it off at least twice because it just didn't fit.
Mm.
And we did other capital things instead.
And we may have that issue. We know there's a roof concern, obviously.
Yeah.
I've also been assured there will be quotes in writing in advance. And
A reputable bonded agency.
correct. And one of the concerns that I expressed was we kept hearing from the school committee that there was this new budgeting process that they were using last year that was advocated for by MARS, which is the Mass Association of Regional Schools or Regional
Yes.
School Districts.
Regional school systems.
Systems, thank you. And, I said, we kept hearing over and over again that Mars was discouraging the school committee from sharing any preliminary information with the towns because there would be too many numbers out there, that would be confusing. And that was foreign to both of the interims. They said, well, no, you have to have this iterative process with the towns where you go back and forth.
Pretty sure that there was a misunderstanding of the consultant's advice.
Yeah, I would. echo
And I'm pretty sure I'm being kind right now.
Fair enough. So there's also, I know that there's gonna be some training going on,
that.
and, the, not just from DESI, but also DESI, I have to say, they have extended their assistance to not only the district, but the towns, because they want to make sure that this works on both sides. And, I think they understood too, after looking at the agreement and seeing how complex it was, they understand our struggle in trying to implement that. And they have some suggestions and they're willing to work with us. But I definitely got the impression that this was we get it. You're a small community. You're not the only small community that struggles with these types of issues, but we need to fully regionalize, fully integrate, and these issues need to be fixed. Let's move forward. There was an understanding that obviously the FY25 process was funky, to say the least. I guess we're all adults here, so I'll say that the word, the negotiation that happened right before town meeting, they were concerned about with proper noticing and advertising, and they were concerned because no time to talk to them about it or go back and forth, and that's why that happened. But they, said that that's not the way the process is supposed to go. And we have to just make sure we follow everything to the T. I certainly know that while the eyes of DESI being on the towns and the schools can be a very helpful thing, if we don't make the changes that they are telling us we need to make on both sides, they will likely get more involved. And I don't want to see that happen. So I'd like to see if we could, you know, fix these issues on our own.
Yeah, I agree, but I think we could use their help in certain areas, and I
Yep.
don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing, and I think we're self-reporting, we're compliant, we're cooperative, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Nope.
To have them involved, and I want to point out to the point about the district gives a number and that's it. Okay, so what was going on the 17th and what was going on the 10th of June
Mm.
was the school committee district looking to have our recommendation.
Right.
So that's an entirely different thing. And I
Yes.
certainly would have been very happy on the 17th to just walk in and vote on the school number.
Right.
So I think it's important that the people at DESI understand that the reason we had that chaos on June 17th is because school committee was interested in our consent to
Mhm.
their number.
And they
And
asked
we were
me,
not willing to give it,
right,
right? So, or our recommendation for their number, not consent, because it's not in our power, but it is in our power to recommend. And to
Right.
give, so that was all about having a positive recommendation from this committee, from the select board, from the town.
absolutely. And they actually
That's
asked
an
me.
important distinction.
It is, and
Okay.
I should have made that distinction. You are correct. They asked me on the call to walk them through the process of how that happened. And while I was a bit in and out, I still understood how we got there and where we were at. And I said if they needed any specific details, I could certainly get that for them. But I explained to them how that whole process came to be and the genesis of it, the fact that there was no time to have discussions because the information wasn't provided. They failed to show up at the FinCom meetings and have those conversations with us in advance of these meetings. And there was a belief that the budget would just pass in May, and it obviously didn't. So the idea that, you know, they understood getting the FinCom's sign off, approval, vote was critical to the budget passing in June. And I think they understood that and their concerns around, you know, information provision and transparency were echoed on behalf of the district, were echoed over and over and over again throughout that phone call. So it certainly wasn't finger pointing at the town, just to make
Mm.
that clear.
Mm.
It was more, you know, the process should have been started well before the night of town meeting, which we all completely agree with. And I said,
Sure.
we agree with as well to them. So,
I want to thank Mary for articulating that point.
yes.
That's a really essential point. And the other thing I'd like to note is that I think that the tone of the commissioner's letter and the thoroughness of the letter indicates that the associate commissioner's intent is to guide and help us
Mm.
in a positive way to accomplish the work that needs to be done. I didn't detect punitive or finger wagging or
Mm.
I felt it was these folks clearly need clarification because they don't follow Mass General laws, rules, because they don't read them all the time. And we're in a new situation where we were a regional high school, middle high school before, but now we're a regional district. And it may not have filtered down to what the process is. So I took great encouragement from that. And personally, I would welcome DESI's knowledge and guidance in the process for sure.
I'll take
Well, I
any.
think, Kristen, this is the second year we've heard you really need one number. We heard that message last year somewhere.
I think we heard it between the May and June meetings.
Is that when it came? up?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
A little
Okay.
late.
yeah,
yeah.
And I also want to thank you for being the point person and working through this. I know it's a bit of a learning curve for you because I believe you told us that you did not work with regional schools before. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
So I want to thank you for the hard work that you've done by consulting, taking it in, processing, understanding, because you're the important person for us and for the town, and you've done the work, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work you've all done to help support me as well in that process. It really helps, and I'm gonna learn even more. Understandably, the town administrator is not supposed to understand school regulations under Mass General Law in depth, but I have learned a whole lot more than I ever thought I probably would have ever needed to, and am continuing to learn. And I think, like you said, whatever technical assistance DESI is willing to offer, you know, and I think the important point is this is what happens when there is a unwillingness on behalf of one or more parties to work with the other. And just to try to say, we're just going to take it to town meeting and take a vote. And I think that message has been echoed loud and clear that that doesn't work. And that, you know, we're professionals, we know what we're doing, come and talk to us, go through the process and, you know, do the right thing. And I can't say enough, you know, from the letter that DESI wrote, you know, not only were they really repetitive on providing that technical assistance, but they repeatedly also stressed encouraging the districts and their member towns to, you know, collaborate and be transparent with the towns on all aspects of the budget process. So I, like you, did not see it as a bad thing. The only point I was trying to make was we should take them and their advice in any way, shape we can, make the changes. And, you know, I just want to make sure that, you know, my understanding is it's a serious recommendation. The technical assistance will be fantastic. And I want to make sure that it's taken as seriously on the district side as well, because I do think that, you know, DESI does have further recourse that they can take if they feel that the district is not complying with Mass General Law. And we all know likely at this table what that is. And, you know, I'm not trying to put any, you know, negativity out there by any means, but I just think that this is an opportunity for us to really work together and to figure out how to get all of our ducks in a row collectively to move forward, to try not to do the finger pointing or the blame as hard as it is to do. Because I don't want to see us, you know, end up in any type of situation where the state comes in and starts to take over processes. I don't think anybody wants that.
Well, if it has to happen, it has to happen.
True.
We're gonna have a discussion about events and it may need to happen, so. If it needs to happen, I welcome it. I don't have the concern about it. Did you get any sense from talking to, is it Sullivan?
Jay Sullivan.
About on the regional agreement, which part might need to be amended, because if I'm remembering conversations that we had, Cliff, there was a reluctance on Berlin's side to agree to this unless we had maintained some control over.
Actually, it was
Berlin.
both towns. It was both towns.
Both towns wanted control over the capital stuff because it's their buildings and they have to do whatever.
It's the
So-
formula. It's exactly that.
And which kind of flies in the face of what this guy, maybe his vision of a regional school. But I don't know if that's the part of the regional agreement that he was alluding to, if you even got into that.
We did. He said the formula of how the assessments are broken down is complex. There are simpler ways to arrive at the formula for the assessments that aren't so complex. And exactly what you just said, where there were visions for the towns in a way of sort of keeping a little bit of control over their elementary schools, that has to go away. It literally has to be one district, and, you know, it sounds like one district under God, you know, indivisible. It can't, there can't be local control over the elementary schools if you are a district.
So let me throw out what we just did last May with the CPA, with the soccer fields. What happens to that kind of project? That goes away, doesn't it?
No, that's town-owned property over in South Commons.
Isn't Berlin Memorial Building also? Am
The
I
bill-
confused?
The building is at the same address, but the building is leased
Leased.
from the town to the school. The rest of the property is still owned by the town.
Leased, so the town owns it and leases it to the school.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just the
Well, we
building.
still own it, right?
We do, but care, custody, and control is under the district.
Okay. Well, then. I wanna like spin out a hypothetical about something, like a CPA project that would affect the school for some reason.
I don't know
So
that the
the
field
building
project
itself.
would, if it was
No,
about
no,
the
I
building,
hear you.
yeah.
I hear you, yeah.
And that's one issue we're gonna have to work out because Boylston really pushed back about the roof at Boylston Elementary and said they wanted to do that project themselves. That capital projects on a building, when you lease it to the schools, the school should be in charge of those projects, not the town. The town
Mhm.
funds them, the school does them.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit backwards too, what happened there. And now the school kind of likes that in a way, right? Because it takes that burden and responsibility off of the school administration, but they have far more staffing than the individual towns do. And, you know, as a procurement person in a one-woman show over here, there's only so many projects that we can run. They have an entire financial department of people that can do procurement.
They did.
They did, well, and they're building back up, right? But so, yeah, I mean, I think that that's an important component to the process. Yes, it is our property, but we, you know, have a say in capital projects. I believe if it's over a certain dollar threshold, and I'm not remembering what that is, if it's 25,000. And we are required to fund it, but the actual process of putting it out to bid and doing all of
Mhm.
that goes through the schools. Typically, school finance directors or business managers, as they used to be called, also have to be MCPPO certified and chief procurement officers as well.
So, anybody know who owns Tonto? Wasn't the Browns, the building? Who owns Tonto?
I don't know the answer to
I
that.
believe the regional district.
Okay. So why wouldn't we put the elementary schools in the district too? Be all done with it.
You mean like subdivide off the land as well?
I don't know, you know, some.
I think the
some
town of
town-
Boylston
I think-
probably still owns that land
I
that's
think
under the school.
process, the situation we have now is typical, not atypical, but I could be wrong.
Mhm.
It also was part of the whole process of developing the regional district, where the issue of control,
Mhm.
also the district, after years of the school district, after years of frustration with the maintenance of the buildings in both towns, wanted to be able to do the maintenance work, because they felt that
Because
they
it wasn't
couldn't-
happening,
because it wasn't happening.
yeah. Mhm.
They, you know, they kept going to the town and they'd say, well, we only
a
the
theme here,
DPW
isn't
has
there?
3 people and we can't do that. And so the district wanted control of, to use your words, care, custody and control. The district wanted to be able to say, we're going to do a project on this school because it's needed. And of course, the town will have to pay for it, but there was that, the school district would do the work.
Yeah.
And
And
get it
that's
done
typical.
and follow up. But the building is leased. I think it's
Correct.
$1, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm trying to remember what that was.
And that is really typical and that lease would remain in effect until at such a time as the school were to be decommissioned by the state as a school. And then then that building reverts back to the town.
Yes.
So I've actually been through that process before, which isn't fun because then the town becomes responsible for all of the maintenance, the heat, the utilities. If there's a mold issue in the building, that is in a closed up, unused building, that now becomes the town's problem again. So, you know, there's pluses and minuses, but I believe there's more pluses to having that care, custody and control fall under the schools. They're the ones and they're operating it.
Done.
Thanks for Kristen for the clarification.
Yep.
Thank you.
Doesn't that question go back to the elementary schools? So they want that to disappear of the individual towns controlling each one. So does that mean they're looking just to where the elementary schools will be apportioned based on a student population basis of how they do this?
We didn't get into the specifics, but they said they had many examples they could give us of how to simplify the formula for assessment. So that's certainly something we could ask them to bring with them when they come in November, if the FinCom's open to having them come in November.
Because I mean, the only thing they really come into is their formulas usually are always just the student population or what's, the percentages between the towns. Which if that type of change made, that would be probably a huge benefit to the town of Berlin and to the detriment of Boylston and probably detriment to the Berlin school too, because I mean, our per from a per student cost is significantly higher, but if it was apportioned, basically you'd be taking all the elementary schools things together and that apportionment would even things out. And no, don't know how Boylston would like to hear that, but I don't know how else they would be coming up with a different apportionment.
Interesting.
And I'm sure that's also a big reason why the town wanted to keep things separate. One, Boylston, because they were squeezing their elementary school very tight to the dollar, and BMS was significantly paid a lot more.
Right, didn't we determine last year it was like 25,000 per pupil at Berlin Memorial and 17 at
Yeah,
Boylston?
yeah, it was $7,000 per head difference.
Difference, okay.
Yeah, which is huge. I mean, and then when people would extrapolate their numbers out, look at the overall district, and depending on how people wanted to argue their case, after the budget came through there, they would go like, we're not, our per student is, compared to other towns and all that type of stuff. And of course, our per student average always plummeted as soon as you put BES into the picture, if you took the whole region
Right,
and calculated the numbers that way.
and I think that's a really important question to ask, because you're right, that shifts things potentially
would-
around significantly.
Well, what's tough
does.
is that if that would shift things significantly to Boylston, who we know is at their cap on things. So that would be, that's what I'm saying is,
Mm.
from a financial standpoint, it could be beneficial to Berlin, but not necessarily beneficial to the,
Wouldn't necessarily be to the district, to the regional district, or to Boylston.
well, yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
Well, and everyone has to agree on an amendment
Yeah.
to the regional agreement, right? So if it's hugely detrimental or lopsided, that's not, obviously not gonna happen. So,
but then you would basically end up leaving pretty much what you have now, because I don't know how else you can calculate.
I can certainly ask for some examples.
I remember these conversations.
Well, there's a reason you remember
all
these
coming back.
conversations, because
It's triggering the memory. and
this,
it's like,
TSC.
these were,
Oh.
these were the same conversations I had on the previous stint on the finance committee when we, built Tohoto and moved, and the thing was to move sixth grade to Tohoto before it was sixth grade went to the elementary school, and everybody looked and go, they saw the funding that went to BMS, and then you could see the funding that went to Tohoto. So why would you want to move your sixth graders when you looked at that case to Tohoto?
Mm.
And that was only one grade. And obviously now it's, that case, Boylston was heavily pushing for it because they saw their elementary school being, getting to capacity, and we're looking at a way of how they could get that capacity for the elementary school by getting rid of one of the grades to a new school that's built, and therefore we're building it to a bigger size. So
Right.
they had a motivation to do that.
Mm.
Well, the associate commissioner said they have models.
Yes,
So
they're
that,
much
because we'll have something,
simpler with less steps, he
we'll
said.
have something concrete to look at.
Yeah.
Rather than speculation, and that will be helpful.
Wasn't the impression I kind of got to, isn't Desi kind of saying that our regionalization agreement is not in compliance with certain things? Is that kind of the message that we're getting to?
In a-
So we
they
almost have no
could-
choice but to amend it?
In a way, yes, because they couldn't understand certain parts of it to determine if it is in fact in compliance with Mass General Law. So
And
that
yet
was
they
the
approved
issue.
it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
I was gonna say.
Let's be clear about
Yes.
that.
Okay.
Fair.
They approved it. Now, it may have been a different commissioner, and it may have been a different staff,
Right.
Things move.
but they approved it.
It was a different commissioner. It was Jeffrey Ryan. I'm looking at the regional agreement. I have it up in front of me.
So if it's no longer complies with Mass General laws, that's not on us.
No, and they did
That's
not come out
on
and,
them.
yeah. They didn't come out and say it didn't comply. I think there was confusion about the intent with regard to the assessment and how it was broken down. And that those changes needed to be made so that when it came to town meeting time and the budget process itself, there wasn't confusion between the towns and the schools as to where those amounts got apportioned out.
So they're trying to have us eliminate kind of like the yours, mine and theirs.
Correct.
It all has
It
to
is
become
one.
ours.
Yes, we are
Okay.
one.
Yeah, and next becomes difficult when one has a much higher cost than the other one, and how do you combine those together when you say they're all your combined?
Right.
And
How does that
it
work?
well, I mean, clearly it just turns into, I mean, I can't see a scenario where it's not a cost shifting. And it would be a cost shift that would go towards Boyle. I
So,
mean,
I played around with some of those numbers, Scott, to the extent I had enough information to play with them because the transparency problem, I couldn't really
Yeah.
get to it. But I actually don't think it cost as much in Berlin as the assessment reflects.
Well,
But I couldn't do the full analysis.
well,
'cause I didn't
we
have
cut
it.
it, we cut it.
Things were missing.
We cut it significantly. I think we cut about like $2,400 reduced that with the final agreement that came through. It was 7,000 based on their original number. I think it went down to $4,600 or $4,800, $4,600 difference. So it's a lot closer, but that's still a big number. And if you combine that together, Boylston they'd be not too happy.
Yeah. Well, maybe there might be a simple fix to all this and along the lines of sticking a few sentences in the regional agreement that says you're gonna present one number to the what do they call it? The authorizing body, the
Right.
town meeting, basically.
The approving body, or
So,
whatever they
so
call it.
you
Yeah.
figure out what you wrote in your document, but when you get to the end of the day, you just give the town a number.
Right.
That could be written in there
They also mentioned.
without changing the arrangements.
Exactly. And they also mentioned, though, that they are living, breathing documents.
Well,
And
yeah,
so it's
sure.
not a bad idea, nor is it uncommon for every 5 to 7 years, the towns to look at them with the regional school districts and make any amendments to
We're
them.
5 years out.
I think
well,
we're at
we are heading-
17 actually was.
We're
when it
heading
was-
towards,
Is it?
well, I'm looking at the approval
was
letter, which is January of
19.
2019.
Oh,
Yeah,
19, okay.
when
January, and the agreement was effective July of 19. So
Yeah.
we're 5 years out.
Gosh, it may have been off the committee that long.
Time flies, huh?
So honestly, I think, as has been said or echoed here, these are all positive things. And I want to take as much help as the commission is willing to offer. And I think it's generous of them to offer that assistance on the town side too. I'm happy to take it. Because I think the more you know, the more we follow rules. They're there to guide us and to protect us and make sure that, everything is done fairly, equitably, procedurally the way that it needs to be. And obviously all of us want to follow the rules, and that keeps us out of trouble. So.
Okay, any more on this topic?
I will send these questions back to Desi. So in addition to the associate commissioner, there's a staff member as well as a consultant that are all working together on this. So they did say to follow up with any questions, and I will send this all back to the three of them and see what we get for
Thank you.
answers.
All right, really want to go to the memo? Any discussion on that, or do you have some things that you were gonna put in, or you had not had a chance to even look at it?
I did have a brief discussion with the department heads that I can share with you about this at the meeting. We really are stagnant on new growth, according to the assessor. So there's parts that we're able to look at right now and parts that we're not because of where we're at with FY 24, as we discussed at the last meeting. But new growth is down. In fact, it is, as I mentioned, coming in slightly lower for 25 than we even anticipated. So we're looking at that and going to have to estimate lower for 26. We also are going to have to take into account the fact that there are some new laws that are going to be going on the books for abatements for FY 26. There's a law called the HERO Act, which increases the amount of exemptions that veterans can apply for their abatements. It is a local option. The assessors are considering putting it on May town meeting. And that increases depending on, what the current exemption is. It's a few $100s more per year, but that does come out of our overlay. And, our overlay has diminished substantially over the past couple of years because of abatements that we've had to give. So we don't have the reserves and overlay that we've had. New growth is not going to be providing us with much additional revenue. Typically, we're good for anywhere from $350,000 to $400,000 in there. The assessor's telling me basically 200 to 250 would be the estimate for FY 26, and that is quite low. And obviously, we know that we're going into a situation where we don't know where the schools are going to be at because of how they're planning to potentially address the FY 25 budget. So what I told the department heads at the meeting, gosh, was that only yesterday? Seems like it was a week. It was yesterday, wasn't it?
Today's one. It was, yeah. it was just-
Feels like it was a week ago at this point. Was, this is not the year to add personnel. This and kind of what I was sort of touting last year was that FY 25 was a year to add personnel and FY 26 would be the year of capital. And I still feel that way because we do have our facilities study and we need to look to protecting and upgrading our buildings and making long-term maintenance and facilities upgrades that will keep our buildings from costing us more in the long run. And we can do that with free cash, but we won't have the free cash estimate until we finish up FY 24. So that's going to take some time. Unfortunately, everything right now is very speculative with local receipts. I don't have any reason to believe they'll be down, but I don't have any reason to believe they will go up either. So I think we're talking about level local receipts, less new growth, and potentially higher requests from the school, given however the FY 25 budget situation shakes out and how much of their reserves that they end up needing to use to potentially rectify that deficit. So, I did advise the department heads to put in supplemental funding requests, but that not to expect at this point that there will be much new funded. It's probably going to be a level services budget until we have more information, and I'm going to move very conservatively. Taking all of these factors into consideration. And obviously, the economy continues to trend toward cost of living and inflation being high and everything. Gosh, I think I looked at milk the other day and it was something ridiculous. Like, I don't even know it was organic milk, but it was like $9 a gallon at Target. And I went, okay, this is absolutely insane. So looking at consumer price index, and trying to determine where we're headed, it's a bit bleak. And I wish I didn't have to present that picture to you all for FY 26, but, unless there is a radical shift in the latter half of FY 25 in terms of development and new growth, we don't have any large scale residential developments on the horizon, or underway. We don't even have any real small scale developments, commercial or residential. So we're basically, our building permit revenue that's coming in now and our, growth there is coming from people doing additions, porches, garages, swimming pools, renovations, those types of things. Those are small. They add up a little bit over time, but they don't add up to much. Another concern that I have and something we were talking about is, and, I know this is going to be highly unpopular amongst some, but we're at about 35% conservation land in town. And the more land we put in conservation and we take out of developable area, the less revenue that we can potentially bring in. And also, when you look at the fact that we have a significant amount of conservation land, but we don't have the funding to maintain that land in terms of putting in trails or passive recreation, but it can't be used for ongoing maintenance, as we've discussed. So I think we need to focus on taking care of what we have. And I think we need to look to rehabilitating the Solomon Pond Mall, which we've been in discussions with Marlboro about. Peg and I actually met with the mayor and the head of the Marlboro Economic Development not chamber, EDC, Economic Development Commission, I believe, to discuss what's going on there. The mall is going up for sale this fall through the receivership. And we are trying to get on the same page with the planning board in terms of zoning, so we are more attractive to potential developers. And Marlboro has already redone their zoning, so we are behind. So
How they rezone, first of all, it was what, retail or commercial? What would their, what's the definition?
they've done a whole rezoning of Donald Lynch Boulevard in general to make the whole area more attractive, including the mall. So there's a bit of a discord right now between the fact that apparently in the 90s, the Solomon Pond Mall was an overlay district that was mutually agreed upon between Marlboro and Berlin.
Yes.
But obviously, we can't control what Marlboro does. They can't control what we do. So they've gone ahead and updated their zoning with regard to their portion of the mall.
And how they, I mean, if they changed it to, I mean, what have they changed it to? Do you know?
Oh, they've added many, many more potential uses. What they're trying to do is promote what they call a mix of residential, retail, and entertainment, similar to what you have down at Apex. So, and residential doesn't necessarily mean housing. As they said, it could mean a hotel. If you look at what you have down at Apex, that's exactly the type of development that you'd want to attract at the mall. You have a mix of restaurants, you've got hotels down there. You know, you've got the whole Apex entertainment complex itself. And if you look at both sides of the road down there, that type of development is what you really want to draw in. So they have loosened up their zoning, made things easier. There's a few things that are allowed by right that are not required special permit, but there's literally a use table that is this long, and I can certainly send it out to you folks so you can see, but they're really trying to attract, we've talked about breweries, we've talked about different other, entertainment types of venues that could be brought in there. And they're really open. The struggle we have at the mall is the 3 anchor stores own not only their stores, but they own their sections of the parking lot as well. So there is literally only a small portion of the parking lot that is owned by the mall, and that's where they've been having the outdoor events like the circus and trying to bring in money, the fun box pop-up stuff that's going on out there. Sears notoriously wants $1 million plus for their building, and they won't lease it to anybody. They only want to sell it. So, and that's a huge building. So it takes the right buyer, and they're willing to sit there and wait. And, they have been for years. If you talk to the mall manager, Liz Kelly, they've tried to bring in tenant after tenant who is interested in that space. And Sears is like, no, they're just holding on to it. Macy's is going out of business. If people don't know that, at the Solomon Pond Mall.
Ours has officially been.
I don't know if that, I believe there's been an announcement about 50 stores being closed or something
Well,
like that
there will
nationwide.
be, they just announced one next in Kingston
Yep,
is going to be closing by the end of the year, but they haven't
so I've
said
heard through the grapevine.
others yet.
So it's not a good situation for us. The mall went down in valuation through an ATB case by several millions of dollars last year that was settled between the town after several years. So we had to abate a significant amount of their tax revenue that the town typically brings in because their valuation went down so substantially. Was it like $12 million that it went
Yeah, it
down?
was some crazy.
It was a crazy amount.
So is that particular abatement, that devaluation, is that going to be showing up for the first time on this year's tax bills? Or when did this happen? Will this,
It was abated in FY 24, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So it's already hit.
So our last tax-
so it will affect the 25.
It will affect 25 because the case was settled in 24. You're right. So it's going to.
so nobody's seen this yet, this impact on their tax bills?
Right.
Okay, all
That would be correct.
right.
So I
Combined with
really wish I
everything
didn't
else.
have doom and gloom to tell you about this evening, but
So I just looked up cost of living, the federal numbers, and expected for 2024 is 3.2%, which is pretty mild. And anticipated for 25 is 2.5%. So that's driving, and the social security number went up.
2.7 over there.
January of 25, it's 2.5%.
2.5.
So we're not in, it's not.
It's not a straight up, no.
No, it's just it's a steady
Yeah.
low rate. It's not, there's a lot of misinformation out about that right now. And so you might be taking it in from that, but if you look at the numbers that I trust, but.
No, I think that's absolutely
Some
right. And
government
that's one of the
numbers.
reasons I wanted that extra week to work on the memo too and make sure that I get all of the factual information in there.
Yeah.
I know one of the concerns is that even if we are seeing that leveling off, there's that compounding of what's happened over the past several years, and those prices are never going back down again. So that's everybody's fear, is they still incrementally go up a little bit every year. It may not be a 7 or 8% spike like we've seen, but now you have everything that's happened over those years.
It's weird because like gasoline prices
That is a weird one.
when.
I paid $2.99 today. I was surprised.
Hello, right? So, but you have a stubbornness around the other market basket kinds of things, the food and the household sorts of things, which to me is a bit odd.
And
And
housing, the housing market is absolutely out of control, which is why you're seeing
Right.
like the accessory dwelling unit by right laws that are coming down from the state,
Yes.
because they're trying to alleviate the housing burden, because you've now got all of the folks that come in that are educated here that could contribute to the workforce leaving because there's no affordable place for them to live, even if they have decent jobs. Your 25 to 40-year-old population in Massachusetts is diminishing substantially.
Well, it's not just single homes that are the problem. Rental units aren't being built.
Yep.
It's housing across the spectrum.
It
It's not
is.
just single family.
Well, those
homes,
dwelling units can be built onto or
No, I
detached,
understand
which
that.
will help.
But they're not, but rental housing isn't being built.
Mm. And it's almost as expensive now as
Not more.
a mortgage.
Yeah, there's a definite trend towards sort of national corporate ownership.
Mhm.
If you look at the city of Worcester and what's going on there, so again, I think there's room for those prices to come down. I think it's the people have the power to keep them up, and then I think you can shake.
Well,
them
things
down
are
a bit.
kind of out. I mean, they're stuck because of the interest rates going up. People before didn't think anything of moving because you get out of your really cheap mortgage and get into another really cheap mortgage. And now unless you're, really making a big commitment of like you're downsizing or you have to move for a job, people are just not moving. A financial incentive to stay put.
Although
and
that just this year, right now, that's changing too. The
Yeah.
Fed dropped, was it a half?
Yeah, but they have a long ways. I mean, it was
Yeah,
years of being low. So, just question on the new growth. This year we targeted, our proposed was 300,000.
Mhm.
Last meeting indicated it was looking maybe only like 250,000. Now, when you said stagnating, you mean stagnating at 250,000 or you're looking at going to 100,000 or?
No, her estimate right now would be a safe number would be between 200 and 250,000 for new growth for FY 26. So either level to what we're seeing now or slightly below. When you looked at new growth for 24 and 25, you still had not 25, I'm sorry, 23 and 24, you still had Highland Ridge condominiums coming on and building permits that were pulled for those projects. And that was still under completion because they did that in phases. We don't have that anymore. That was pretty much the last big project that dropped off. And I've talked to Rich about it, and it's like, you don't even have these.
Permits early.
But they didn't issue everything in terms of closing out. You have to have all of the occupancy
The final.
and the final sign-offs. So not everything hit right away in terms of taxes and sales. So the issue is too, we don't have any of the small, even 4 or 5 house developments that are coming in, Mark Rhodes developments or anything like, let's throw out names, but it's there's just not a lot, which is why we've been trying to focus on the Solomon Pond Mall and what we can do there. I have to say Highland Commons is doing very well, and obviously as long as they, the mitigation agreement is great that we get for public safety up there, that's hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
And, but outside of that, there's just really not a lot going on. One of the things, speaking of not adding staffing, that I would like to do is propose getting some type of assistance with a part-time town planner who could also look at economic development. I do have a background in economic development, but not planning, but I don't have time to do it all, unfortunately. And it would be really helpful to get, if we could share with another community, even like 10-hour-a-week person who could kind of help coordinate all of the land use boards and also look at potential opportunities on the horizon, because there are mass development grants out there for getting parcels, what they call pad ready for development. And ways to attract different businesses. It's just, we talked to Meredith at, in Marlboro, and when they got, I forget which brewery it is downtown, Lost Shoe, I think it is, in Marlboro, they literally put an ad in a national beer magazine and got over 100 inquiries nationwide from people wanting to come in. So it's having the people and the time to be able to advertise and recommend and look at our zoning. One thing that is good is the planning board is undertaking what's called a zoning diagnostic process right now with the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, where they're looking to update our zoning regs, make sure they're aligned with state bylaws, and making recommendations on new bylaws that should potentially be added. We also applied for a grant to take it one step further and do some, rezoning and redesign. And my goal for that would be to see what we can make a little bit less restrictive. You look at what happened at Highland Commons and the fact that we don't allow drive-throughs, but a stone's throw away are Panera and Starbucks, and we lost out on all of that meals tax revenue because we don't allow drive-throughs in Berlin. Do we want to look at what we could do at Solomon Pond? Can we do zoning that allows uses in certain districts? I think that, the problem is people aren't recognizing what an impact it has on their taxes when they're thinking so restrictively about zoning, and when the focus is solely or primarily on conservation land. I think we have to have more of a balance. I think it's essential to preserve what is Berlin. But I also think we've sort of started to reach that tipping point where we're almost flipping too far in the other direction. We also give substantial open space and small business exemptions. And as we look to what the assessor is saying is potentially that single tax rate, which I did reach out to her, I haven't gotten that back yet, for FY27. The exemptions that we put out there, which are very helpful to some people, are harmful to other people. So we need to look at how are we spreading the wealth, if you will, or the tax burden, rather the better way to put it, equally amongst residents. And it's a struggle. Most towns of our size really do just have a single tax rate. They don't do business exemptions. They don't do open space exemptions. So we have to make some decisions. And the hard thing is, once you've gone down that road, it's hard to pull it back, right? Because everyone who's getting those exemptions is going to go, hey, well, I'm not going to vote for that. I don't want that. That's going to affect me. But, we're disproportionately impacting certain residents in this town, and it's hurting people, particularly people on fixed incomes that are older, that have had their houses for decades. And that's where my concern primarily lies.
Next, I was also going to ask you, you mentioned that there was the legislature, what was it, the HEROES Act, you said?
Yes.
Now, again, obviously sounds like it's not exactly being mandated on you. You do have a choice, but I'm assuming the state's not providing any funding if you do. So if we do apply that, basically you're giving to somebody and taking away from other people in town.
Correct. But we are being strongly encouraged to adopt it, to support veterans. And there is also sort of outcry from the what are we doing for seniors? So there's this push-pull where it's sort of like you said, you're helping someone, but you're hurting somebody else. So how do you make those choices? It's not an easy decision.
Right. Well, the state basically didn't do the hard decisions. They just did it, but not giving you any money. They just
You
come up with
decide.
something. This sounds like a really good idea. I
Right.
mean, it's like pay the teachers as much as you want, do this type of thing as much as you want, but we aren't going to give you any funding for it. It's like it makes them feel good, but it doesn't actually accomplish anything.
Right, and then you get the people coming, well, I hear there's this state exemption, well, why hasn't Berlin adopted it? Well, are you not supportive of your veterans? I mean, it becomes a political issue, and the people start reaching out to their elected officials going, well, what do you mean we could have this, but you guys haven't adopted it? So you sort of kind of get cornered into doing it because morally, it's the right thing to do. Financially, it's a challenging thing to
Well,
do.
unfortunately, you could morally find a reason for every person in town for their category. So
Fair.
that's, Yeah.
Exactly.
No.
And where do you stop, right? And that's why, just tied up with all that too, the open space exemptions, the small business exemptions, like where does it end? Because that
Yeah.
overall burden then is getting
well, that's where it's,
hefted on other people.
I mean, it sounds like that. I mean, the best approach, again, it's always a difficult climb, but level everything out and just eliminate. I mean, it's not easy, but
No.
I mean, there is a certain point of you have to clean the slate.
And that the reval is going to help us a lot. The 5-year revaluation that the assessor's office is looking at, because that is really going to give us actual assessed values of homes in town based on current market conditions and comparisons. And that will give us a sense of where we need to go once she has that data and information, and she'll know better where we're at with commercial versus residential when we have those updated values.
Is that underway or is that next
It
year?
is
Okay.
FY 25 and 26. It will be done next year. It's a 2-year process and it happens every 5 years.
So another question is, last time we talked, I mean, you were still going back and you went through the first quarter of FY 24's books. How far have you made it at this point? Have you made much progress?
Yeah, actually.
It's only been 2
well,
weeks.
We're in November, which is good. And at this time, not seeing anything concerning, which is encouraging as well. I also have to give kudos to June, because June has been basically you have a treasurer side and an accounting side when you do reconciliation. And we've been doing it on the treasurer side, and the accountant matches, and you've been able to match into September.
October, I'm working on
Now you're
October.
on that through September, rather,
Yep.
excuse me.
Yep.
So we are pretty close on the data we have, and it's coming in weekly. So
Okay.
we're moving as fast as we can. And the concerning period, if you will, would be through February. So we are now much closer
Closing the
to
gap.
getting to February.
How about the tax rates?
That all is driving when we can set the tax rate. We have to get all
You
of
have to
that
get all of
done.
FY 24 done.
correct.
Right. So we're still a ways out.
We're still in a holding pattern, unfortunately, and I don't even have an estimate. As soon as we do, once we get closer with the recon, we'll be able to project it out a little bit further. The problem with the recon is some of the months become a bit more complicated as we get closer to that deadline of February. And there are, more reconciliations that are having to happen because of some things that were missed on the treasurer side. So just not record, it's sloppiness. I mean, I have to be frank. It just gets sloppier. So unfortunately, that takes a little bit more time.
Is there a drop dead date that you're dealing with from the state that you have to have the tax rate? Or is it, there's no specific
No.
date, you'll just start getting nasty emails or anything of that nature?
No, we did have a CPA deadline that we met in
We did that,
September.
yeah, how we can
Um,
get our state portion as well as everybody else can get theirs. We're working as fast as we can. We really are,
Yeah.
because it affects a lot.
Yeah,
It
obviously, yeah.
does. And I have, obviously employees that are under a tremendous amount of stress going through this. And I want to support them in any way that I can and give them, you know, the time that they need to be accurate and to make sure that we don't have any issues. Obviously, what's going on with the school budget for FY 25, keeping an eye on that, and does that end up having any impacts, which I'm hoping the answer to that is no. But I just really think, unfortunately, it's like, as my grandmother used to say, a tincture of time. You know, this is just going to take the time that it takes to sort it out. But no, we're not up against any specific state deadlines, but obviously we can't send the tax bills out till we
Right.
set the tax rate. Can't set the tax rate until we have, you know,
Right.
the recap sheet done. Can't do that till we have local receipts and where we're at, and we're still reconciling the revenues. So,
Yeah, and we definitely want to do it as soon as we can, so that we don't run out of money.
correct. That's the other thing. We may have to do a short-term borrowing
Borrowing.
at December town meeting.
We're trying.
We're trying our best. We're doing, you know, unfortunately, I don't wish that anybody else was in this position, but I can say that we're not the only town that's been in this position. And we do have a path forward. We know what we're doing and we're sticking on it. And we also have a revitalized process that we're in for FY 25, so that we know where we're headed, and safeguards, you know, obviously in place, so we don't run into these types of situations again. So, and I have to say, the new staff in the treasurer collector's office has been phenomenal to work with, both their work ethic, their work quality. Something, you know, obviously, given past circumstances, we keep a close eye on. And I think, you know, June has had a really positive working experience, if I can speak for you, working with them.
Yeah.
And, you know, we are literally, like you said, trying to forge forward as quickly as we can. It's not easy. And managing expectations is not going to be easy as well. And I'm well aware of that. But I'm trying to take the pressure off of our employees. And, you know, trying to take the questions and take the hits, if you will, my way, because I want to make sure that they have the space and the time in the room to make sure everything's done correctly. So just send people my way.
Okay, anything else we want to go? We're meeting on next Wednesday. Obviously, we're meeting Monday with select board, and schools will be presenting to us, or the superintendent and finance director, so we'll get more information there.
Okay.
So our Wednesday, we have to have the memo letter signed off.
We'll have that for you on
Okay.
Wednesday.
now-
Was the meeting for
Yeah.
Monday confirmed?
I am waiting for final confirmation on that. Just that I was actually going to add that when you were
Okay.
done.
Oh, there is that.
Yeah, because
I've played phone
last night
tag.
it was iffy.
Yeah, Heidi and I were at the end of the candidates forum. Al Ganem came to the forum. He was there couldn't make it to the beginning, but he was there for a big chunk of it. And he was unclear about that on his calendar, but I don't think he actually keeps his own calendars.
Yeah, superintendents don't usually. keep their
No,
own calendar.
but he was not clear about whether that
Yeah.
was going forward, and so it wouldn't hurt to do a follow-up. make
Yeah,
sure that-
I actually left them a voicemail today. We played phone tag yesterday and today.
Yeah, okay,
So I
that's probably
am,
what he was talking about.
yeah, we haven't probably nailed down the details, but we did select that date in person.
Yeah, and he briefly said a few things about the letter too. You know, I'll just chit chat. The DESI letter,
Yeah.
so.
All right,
But as soon as I have any further information on that, you and the select board will be the first to know.
all right. Any other topics we have to cover?
No,
We're all set. All right, motion to adjourn.
Okay,
And
so you don't, on the agenda was the October 8 meeting of the school committee, but you're not talking about that.
No.
Okay.
Oh,
You just wanted us to
well, I think
watch it
we've
to
already,
win.
yes, right. We want to watch it. And of course, we're having now this meeting, well, assuming on Monday. And we'll see.
That's how
get
we
more
left
updates.
it. So yeah, as long
Yeah.
as nothing changes.
I mean, there's nothing more for us, that really, I mean, to discuss on it. I mean, it's just informational, right?
Yeah,
And we just need to
that's
know
how I see
about
it.
it.
You
And
did bring
Monday
it up.
we'll hopefully get more
You did bring
information
it up.
and we just have to
Hmm.
keep tracking of that.
Okay.
But there's nothing of any actions we can do.
Nothing,
yet.
nothing for us to do about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Um,
I'll second the motion.
all right, in favor of adjourning? Aye.
yeah, I.